Hi there. First off, apologies if I sound really awful and tired, but I feel really awful and tired because I've got a bad cold. There's a lot going around at the moment. It sucks to be me this week, and by extension, it sucks to be you because you have to listen to me. Sorry about that. Anyway, it's time for the latest episode of what could be called vaguely unconnected things happening on Fraser's Ridge, aka the final season of Outlander. Let's get on with the show. Episode 803, Adrius Fraseri, starts out with Brianna looking at some grooming implements for her wee Fanny. But when she wanders off, some random sex pests come up, and they start hitting on the wee Fanny. And she's all sass back, so they bugger off. And then Brianna comes back and she's like, let's go kick those guys' asses, but Fanny says no, so they go home. And back on the ridge, Jamie's pissed off because Claire got a letter from Lord John asking if Brianna can paint a portrait, because apparently that's a thing Brianna can do. But Jamie's kind of annoyed because Lord John and Claire did the dirty in last season's arguably stupidest and most contrived storyline.
I have had carnal knowledge of your wife.
And that's going to take up about 20% of this episode because they're going to argue about it a lot. It doesn't make sense to Claire that he's still annoyed, so she resorts to racism.
Pig-headed Scot. He's Scottish, which means he's stubborn.
Well, you're a racist English woman, Claire, so maybe shut up. And Brianna ends up finding about the whole escapade as well, and because only one person is allowed to be annoyed at Claire at a time in this show, Brianna just finds the whole thing hilarious instead of thinking her mum is actually just a silly drunk tart. But meanwhile, Jamie goes off to see Captain Cunning to tell him off about the sex pest, and the Cap says, well, you know, that was just a random old soldier in my son's unit dropping off his guns. Okay, sure, put a pin in that, think about that later. And that gets everybody talking about guns, so Roger and Bree have this idea they could go and buy some guns to help arm the Ridge, and they can do that when they're visiting Lord John down at Parsley and Fungus's. But Jamie's kind of annoyed about the Lord John thing, so he storms off in a huff. And this leads to Jamie and Claire having a big argument, so they have it out, and finally they bonk themselves happy again. And, you know, it's good that we're tying up boring storylines and intrigue, because the next scene is basically Jamie deciding that Frank's book must be true, based on Claire telling him a little bit about Frank, and them both talking about blackjack. So that's another storyline question tied up. Later on, Claire meets a black lassie whose mum's having a difficult time with babies. Then the baby daddy pops up and he's all like, look, I don't trust white folks, I think we should leave. And he gets told off because, you know, this is obviously Dad's a wrong week on Outlander. So Jamie and him decide to have a drink while Claire delivers the babies after a bit of walking around. But unfortunately one of the babies comes out bad and Claire thinks it's dead. And while she's mourning it, a blue light happens. And then there's a flashback and suddenly boom, the baby's alive again. Okay. And this spurs Claire to tell Jamie that she remembered Master Raymond and Faith when it happened, and she saw a blue light. And Jamie's like, well, I didn't see that. It's probably just luck. And he looks like he's thinking, maybe my wife's a witch again. And dramatically she walks to the other side of the room and asks him what colour her hair is, because that's the kind of thing that people do in real life. And he comes over and looks and says, oh, now you've kind of just gone white at the front all of a sudden. And he's not fussed, despite the fact that's a bit weird. But anyway, Jamie decides to take his wee Fanny out into the woods to a cairn to cement her being part of the family, and then a gunshot rings out, and he runs off to find Fat Bastard has only gone and shot the sex pest, and is about to string both him and his pal up, and Jamie tells him to piss off, and he does, but he says, I'm keeping these guns, and Jamie's like, sure, whatever, because Jamie's just found a letter in the guy's boot, addressed to Captain Cunningham, so he goes off to Captain and tells him off, and then he realises, hang on a minute, that gun you had earlier, I'm going to have a look at that. So he randomly has a look at it and finds it contains a key code, which turns out that the captain is raising a loyalist militia on the ridge. Oh no. Conflict. So Jamie decides to leave and not do anything, because, you know. Meanwhile, William's gone back home again, and rightly Lord John thinks that this whole toy soldier undead Uncle Ben theory is complete nonsense. So to placate him, but you know, he's a good dad, so he decides to placate him, and invites him to a dinner where Ben's boss will be. So just before he goes, he's... oh, sorry, excuse me, someone's been down the gym. Anyway, it turns out Amaranthina, or whatever she's called, decides to give him a beetle-covered body warmer because that's what romance is, and she totally doesn't want to jump all over his bones. And at the dinner, William and Ben's boss have a chat, and it turns out he's pretty sure that Ben's dead, and William's a little bit sad. Even more so because then some bugger steals his seat at the lunch, and that guy starts getting handsy with Lord John because it's Lord John's ex from last season, and he wants an introduction to go and meet Fungus for some reason. And Lord John says it in return, if I do that, then you have to go and find out about Captain someone or other, who I honestly have no idea who this character is. I'm sure it's not going to be particularly important, and if it is, they'll make a big thing of explaining who he is to remind everybody on the episode. And back home, Bill gives Amarensis Ben's old clobber, and she literally couldn't care less, but she goes to put it away, and when she's opening the drawers, he sees the wee soldier in the drawer, and that cements in his mind that Ben is toast, and that's another storyline wrapped up. So they go outside and, realise fairly quickly that the most likely storyline that their characters have left is that they're going to fall into bed over the next few episodes. So they get towards that by having her flirt by touching his titius Hercules and then giving him a kissius if you please. And then they decide to roll the creditors end of episodes. So what did I think? Well, I don't think this was a bad episode, particularly. I mean, it did really feel like a mishmash of a lot of random scenes, rather than being a cohesive whole. Although I will say, it looked okay, although it didn't look particularly special. There was some good acting moments, although there was nothing blew me away particularly. And there were a lot of thematic links. I mean, you've got things about people getting guns, and you've got things about dads being wrong, and both of them realising it's just easier to let your missus be right, anything for an easy life. And, I mean, yeah, there was some decent stuff in this episode, but this is not going to be anybody's favourite episode of the show, and it's not going to be everyone's least favourite episode of the show. It's kind of forgettable, and that's sadly all I've really got for the positives, because look, it was quite mediocre, and very little that happened in this episode felt important, and the stuff that did was done in a weird way or not very well. Let me explain. Okay, so I've talked many times on this about why the whole kicking the dog thing is a bit too obvious. The kicking the dog idea is that you have a character literally do something like kick a dog because it immediately tells you that this character is a bad character, and they're going to be nasty, and then you don't actually mind if they die later or if it suddenly turns out that they're a baddie. You've had that little bit of a reveal. So, I mean, we've got this nasty officer guy right at the beginning who's like randomly creeping on Fanny. Okay, sure. But it felt like that only happened so that Bree would then tell Jamie, and then Jamie would visit Cunningham, and then later on so that Fanny would recognise the guy so Jamie can revisit Cunningham and figure out the whole gun code thing in 2 minutes, which was really, really convenient and really unlikely. And again, maybe it makes more sense in the book, but I mean, that whole storyline could have felt like a detective story, but it didn't. It felt like it was just something that was happening in the background and the show wasn't that interested in it, when it should have been maybe the main thrust of the episode. But instead, it felt like way too much of this episode was taken up with rehashing that boring Lord John and Claire had a shag once storyline. That, honestly, that plagued half of last season with tiresome nonsense. And back again this season, we're still going over it. And yeah, I get it, in real life it would be a big thing, but this is a TV show. A TV show where it also tries to pretend it's about crazy mythological and wacky things. I mean, look, okay, look at Claire's story specifically. I mean, apart from the times when she was arguing with Jamie about why apparently it was fine that she shagged Lord John and he shouldn't be bothered by it, which is silly. Anyway, and then he gives up and he bonks her forgiveness. Sure. Part of the storyline is what? She was out in the garden and then she delivered a baby. I mean, okay, cool. I mean, she is a nurse, so we know she does that, but we don't need to see her doing it all the time unless it actually adds something to the story. And in this case, we don't know who these people are. So there's no emotional attachment to that aspect of the baby delivery. But also, out of absolutely shit fucking nowhere, she suddenly learns how to do force heal like she's Rey Palpatine from Star Wars. She can just magic somebody well, or even back to life when they're dead. I mean, we have just lost cabin pressure here if that's the case. I have long said that I don't care for magic in this show. I know that might seem like a contradiction considering it's a show about time travel through Magic Stone Circle. But for most of the show, it's been a historical romance drama. The time travel aspect has just been a little thing that allowed them to move back and forward in time. There wasn't much else going on. And yes, they've thrown in like a magic necklace at one point, and they threw in a skull or a stone that let somebody sort of have a flashback of something, and a couple other bits of random hooey. And I don't like the idea that Claire and Faith and the French guy are all turned into some kind of magical superhero. It's silly and it jars horribly with the remainder of the show. But now we're full on just giving Claire magical powers. Okay, the problem with this is, and I'm calling it now, the entire storyline that we're supposed to care about this season is that Jamie is going to die on Magic Mountain. And on episode 3 of this season, they've just given Claire the ability to bring people back from the dead. So What is the most obvious thing that could happen in the show is that Jamie is going to die on Magic Mountain and she's going to have to, like, Kylo Ren him back to life. I mean, are we clear on that? That's going to happen, isn't it? Because this show is to unpredictable plot lines what surround sound is to a deaf person. Completely and utterly useless. I mean, and the Williams storyline? I mean, I kind of hope that this is a misdirection because, again, episode 3 out of 10 and Williams' story has basically run out of juice. I mean, unless he's going to have something completely new happen, he's just going to be mooching around and slowly build up to him boffing Pigswill and marrying her at some point, you know? I mean, maybe Ben will turn up alive later, but it seems unlikely. You feel like you would have had a bit more setup in that case, but honestly, the entire Lord John and William storyline feels like such an afterthought. I mean, it's even more of an afterthought than Roger and Brianna, who literally seem to only be turning up for random moments here and there. So yeah, this week, I wasn't very happy. So where does that leave us? Well, it leaves me having to apologise that this video is probably a little bit short, and it may even be a little bit late, depending on how fast I get it done, because as I said, I am not very well, which means I also have a lot less patience than I would otherwise. But even if I didn't, this show is dragging its feet, and a lot of these are the same problems I had last season and problems I had to a lesser extent the season before. It's a show that feels aimless a lot of the time because there's no clear central narrative question. And again, if you are watching this show purely because either you just want to see the books adapted because you like the books and you want to see what bits they leave in and leave out, that's fine. And if you're somebody who watches it because you just want the soap opera of some people who live on the ridge doing some stuff, that's fine. That is not why I watch TV shows. I watch TV shows because I want interesting and compelling plots. And this one is really struggling. As I said, the whole premise of this season seems to be predicated on the idea that we're supposed to really care about Jamie dying, that maybe him getting killed up a hill is a big deal because this is the final season of the show, so they might actually kill him off, and maybe he will. But the fact that the show just gave a character the magical healing powers, like literal necromancy raising the dead kind of powers, and I'm supposed to worry that Jamie might die, I just don't care now, because we've just got a get out of jail free card. And I don't think anybody watching the show is daft enough to think that that isn't what they would do in this show, because this show isn't inventive enough to do something different. I mean, maybe they'll prove me wrong, but I don't think so. And anyway, I am just tired. I'm tired, I'm not well, I'm going to my bed, I'm going to get some sleep. So I will see you all next time. So till then, these have definitely been my grumpy opinions.